Okay, so I will talk in English because I send these recordings outside of the country as well. Guna Raspblund, born in 1885, and he died in 1940, so he lived only for 55 years. He could have lived longer, and he was born on this day of September, to 22nd of September. I show, as I usually do, some portraits, some photographic portraits of the architect whom we try to celebrate. And I would say an interiorized man, probably with a high level of introversion, very serious, and I would say sensitive. This is an image of his atelier, of his studio, and we don't see too many ladies here or women. At that time, there were mostly men who occupied themselves with architecture. This is not the case any longer, and I think it's a good thing that it's not the case any longer. Anyway, he probably worked in his apartment or a rented apartment. It doesn't look like a typical architecture office especially in certain countries, so-called developed, where large architecture offices. I'm talking about successful, prolific, productive architects. It was a different time then. Anyway, but Guna Raspblund was a force in architecture. I would say together with the Sigurd Leverens, and they also worked together for the cemetery. They developed in Sweden, in Stockholm. Such architects like Guna Raspblund, Sigurd Leverens deserve a lot of attention, in my opinion, because as opposed to the sensationalism of our times, here we had two very profound architects, very serious architects, who were not flashy, were not, they didn't have, they didn't even have the desire, I would say, for being so-called stars. So there was a certain modesty, but this modesty was not, conducive to insignificant work. I would say quite the opposite. Anyway, we begin the travel through the works of these three architects today, through the Woodland cemetery in Stockholm by Guna Raspblund. He didn't work alone here. He also worked with, as I said, Sigurd Leverens, but at one point Leverens left, and most of the buildings are done by Guna Raspblund. This is probably the competition entry for the planning, the site planning, the landscaping of this very beautiful cemetery in Stockholm. I think anyone who visits Stockholm should pay a visit to this place. There are several buildings here, and I visited it myself, various functions relating to what a cemetery is. And you are going to see a modern architecture which is not aggressive, which is very, in a very inspired way, connected with the landscape within which it finds itself. Of course, some of the buildings like this one, for example, and we are going to see images with it, belong to a certain era, to a certain time. It's true. But yeah, I mean, look at the handwriting there. This was not generated by a computer, but it was handwritten. It expresses a certain time, when people took time to even write a word, something we don't do any longer. Anyway, some would describe his works as being kind of neoclassical. But there is yes, there are touches of what we might call neoclassicism, but there is also a modernity which cannot be denied, at least in some of the works. He works with simple. He worked with simple geometries, like here in this chapel that we saw already 2 drawings of, and we are going to see pictures. It's an architecture that is simple but not simplistic, and very sensitive, and with a certain level of discretion, which is missing in today's architecture, I would say quite often. I hope I have in this presentation also a newer building by a contemporary architect, also in the same cemetery in Stockholm. I'm talking about the architect Chelsing, a very interesting architect, still rather young. Anyway, sketch by Guna Raspblund. We see here columns, the unavoidable columns, but you will see that from the drawing to the actual building, there is a certain distance. The longitudinal section through this chapel, he does operate at the intersection, so to speak, of the circle with the square. There are, even in his famous Stockholm Public Library, there is a powerful cylinder or circle in plan, but then the geometry around it is rectangular. This is an image from the cemetery. This is the cremation place, and I think it's in its austerity is very adequate for its function. Even the cross that emerges from the grass, the way it does, is sober, is serious, is meditative, if I can say so. It is a superior architecture, and it's no surprise that this building and a few other buildings built around here, are present in histories of modern architecture, especially this one. But these were also built by Guna Raspblund. It's a very serene, but not in a superficial way. It is a very serene place here. It's a meditation on the ending of life, which is not superficial, and at the same time it's not morbid, I would say. Although some might say that this arrangement of structural arrangement of the columns and the slab above could evoke a certain gravity, but the function of the building, I would say, requires it. And it is not ideologically charged, if I can say so. It's an abstract handling of a serious theme, the ending of life, and it has dignity. Guna Raspblund at Woodland Cemetery in Stockholm. The Swedes, they do know something about, I mean, they do have a respect for nature, and it's shown even here. They don't try to, embellish anything, but at the same time, they take care of things. And with simple means, they achieve a lot, in my opinion. All these buildings are by Guna Raspblund. I hope I have here an image with the chapel built by Sigurd Leverets, himself a remarkable architect, a former engineer. Now, I don't know what to think about these columns. They are a little bit maybe too referential to a certain past that is also slightly, I mean, modified, simplified, but I guess they are not, alarmingly agitating the purist. This is a building, is true, which is a little bit less modern, so to speak, than other buildings by him, but it still has discretion, I would say, and at the same time, it's not melting down, so to speak, in its confrontation or dialogue with the trees around. Sorry for the resolution of this picture is not great. I would say that in this place, in this cemetery, the balance between nature and man is almost perfect. It's just the right equilibrium. The human beings built some buildings here, but they are not, provoking nature in arrogant terms. At the same time, they are distinctly human. They are not they express the human will, but again, not in an arrogant way. I like these buildings very much. I don't know exactly what their function is, but this is a primal architecture. It's archetypal almost, and it has a strong geometry. But again, I wouldn't call it an arrogant architecture at all. And even if the walls are, affected by the passage of time, by the elements, they still have dignity because the spirit of the work is still there. Now here we see the buildings had been cleaned up. Anyway, Sweden is a very civilized country and it takes care of things. Now, this is the architect I mentioned, Chelsing, Johan Chelsing. He's a contemporary architect and he's quite an interesting architect. He built a crematorium in the Woodland cemetery, and I thought it's an occasion to also show his work with a few images. It's not that, no, I wouldn't say he inspired himself from Guna Raspblund. No, he didn't. And you'll see the building from the outside is very different. Look at this. It's actually, you'll say this one is a little bit almost depressing. It shows a certain level of pessimism, I would say. It's an interesting building, but it's almost a building without illusions. More so than, in fact, I would say that the buildings by Guna Raspblund do not display, such feelings of almost despair or, here there is austerity, but there is a different kind of austerity compared with the works, with the buildings by Guna Raspblund. And we are going to see certain things that, maybe some people would react negatively against. Like here, it's hard to imagine that this is a building that is associated with accompanying one on the last journey on earth, or that it is connected with that threshold between life and death. It could even look like some kind of a deserted building or an industrial building, and yet it is in a way a serious reflection on the ending of life, on the limits of life. So this is not Guna Raspblund, this is Johan Chelsing. And interior, what can we say? It's maybe it's not for everybody to like this sort of architecture. Maybe it's too factual, so to speak, and it is in a way. But anyway, this is what Chelsea did. Fortunately, the trees around, the landscape around is, I think, still encouraging us to have some hope on this earth, if possible. So this is how the building looks from above, hidden as it is between, you know, in a sea of trees. It's more, I would say, it's more severe than the architecture of Guna Raspblund. This is the plan of the building. In some respects, I would call it a building without illusions, an architecture without illusions. Now, being about death, maybe it is appropriate to be so, but I don't know. I mean, you know, certain religions claim that there is an afterlife. So if there is an afterlife, why should such buildings be, you know, without illusions? Okay, other projects and drawings by Guna Raspblund. We are back to Guna Raspblund. Sorry for the resolution, some pencil drawings, rendering for an exhibition hall representing Sweden. I don't know what world exhibition. I don't know if this was built actually. So I just show now graphic works by Guna Raspblund, because at that time people drew manually, and I think the drawings also have something to say about the creator, the draftsperson, the architect who employed his own hands in order to draw. This is a plan which has some similarities to the public library, the Stockholm Public Library, a major work by Asplund, which we are going to see. His villas, his houses in the country are a little bit, for my taste, a little bit too sweet. Some of them, not his own house, but some of them are a little bit, yes, almost bucolic or pastoral or historicist, if I can say so. We are going to see a few examples. Sorry about this, you cannot see very well. He fluctuated or pendulated between the sacred and the profane. He had he designed a few chapels and buildings for you know, for the transition between life and death, but also he designed buildings for the mundane life, you know, like here. Or like here, you know, kind of an architecture on a boat. He designed a boat, I think. Here it is, and with some functions, I mean, some rooms to be rented within or to be occupied temporarily by human beings on the ship. It's actually a house with you know, a certain number of bedrooms and with a large living room, so on a ship. Anyway, a chair. He also designed a few pieces of furniture, very discreet pencil drawings, as you know, architects used to do on yellow tracing paper or not so yellow tracing paper. Guna Raspblund. chapel again, mourning. Again, here we see the dead, and we see, I don't know what is here. And, you know, it seems he was preoccupied by the end of life. The crucifixion there. And, you know, this we saw an image with the buildings. This was the project submitted, I think, to a competition. I like this architecture. It's abstract, it's almost impersonal, and yet it has touches of it's not narrative. It's not a narrative architecture, but it has a certain clin d'oeil addressed to what we might call the past. Maybe that's why he's considered by some as being a neoclassical architect. I think there are various influences here from neoclassicism, even from vernacular architecture, then from a certain modernism, which could be perhaps associated with a certain form of rationalism. The Stockholm Public Library, a very important building by him, here it is. It is literally a temple of books, the temple of books, maybe even the temple of books. I had been here, and I have to say, I entered this building with great emotion. It's very simple. You would say, what's so special about this building? I don't know. There is a magic related to it. Maybe because I knew the building from drawings and pictures, but and you know it's a library. You know there are books inside. That cylinder until to a certain height is covered inside with books. I think it's a very good architecture, which speaks in a way about the ideality of what the book is, you know, and knowledge. And you know, you have in a way the house of man, which is square and is you know, a rectangular architecture and geometry. But then we have the cylinder, which seems to evoke or symbolize an aspiration for roundness. I'm not saying more, you know, like in a church where you aspire towards God. Here you aspire towards knowledge. And look at the books, you know, covering the curved walls of the cylinder. It's an inspiring experience to visit this building. Although, you know, the walls are functionally addressing the necessity and possibility to actually access the books. It's not like it's happening today in some flamboyant libraries where there are books even on the ceiling, so to speak. Now, here the books remain at the level which is accessible to those who want to find certain books. The Scandinavian reticence is present here too, and I admire this reticence. This is the plan, and it's clear, you know. I mean, you look at the plan, you look at the section, and this cylinder of knowledge is just that. You know, it's an aspiration, you know, through the roundness in that space, you feel, I would say, inspired to aspire towards something that transcends the rectangularity of the enclosure parts of the building. I'm not saying that the book is sacred necessarily, or that here we have an expression of the sacred and what is around it, the expression of the profane. But there is a certain tension and duality here, which I think should not be underestimated. The building is very simple, conceptually and otherwise. It's a whole that is coherent, is modern, but at the same time, it's not totally divorced from what we call the past. Some years ago, there was a competition, an international competition organized to amplify the library, to extend it. And I think I have at the end of this presentation some projects that were submitted for this competition. It is the book, the building of knowledge, and even the ornamental entities testify about this in a discreet and yet sensitive way, in a subtle way. Even prosaic elements, if I can call them so, are designed in a certain way with a certain sensitivity. We don't see too many too many designs in this way, serving just a sink, with washing your hands or drinking a glass of water. It's designed very well, and it's an event in itself, discrete but distinct at the same time. And the way the light filters through those windows, rather narrow and tall, it could also be magical, like in this picture. It's an excellent building, probably one of the best libraries ever built. Even the lamp is beautifully designed, I would say. In very simple terms, but it has nobility, it has dignity, and it's yet is sensitive. This is an older picture. I don't think this lake exists now. Anyway, now we arrive at another important building by him. I would say a very successful architecture, Courthouse extension in Gothenburg. You see the old building here, and you see the new building by Guna Raspblund here. And at the first sight, you almost think it's a unity, that you don't see actually, you have to look the second time to realize that this is a modern building, as opposed to this one. This one is neoclassical. This one is modern, but you still see that he proposed a building that was new and built a building that was new, but also discreetly, subtly connected with the old building, with the previous building. Sorry about this picture here. This is the building, and I really think this is a very subtle architecture. It's not intrusive. It's not. It has personality, but it's a quiet personality. You see the details. This window and this window, they are different. They are very different, but yet somehow they create almost a good marriage, so to speak, although they are different, as you can see clearly here. And really, I think here he shows himself as a very subtle architect who can negotiate with the past in terms in which or through which he doesn't lose his own personality, his own individuality, but at the same time, he shows that this is a building built at a different time than this one. In other words, it's both continuation and a break, or there is it's a continuation in the sense of connecting with the previous building, but it's also a break because the architectural language is modern. And you can see even here, and I'll show also pictures from the inside. The courtroom is a very appropriate architecture for such a function. It has worms. It's not scary. It's not the cold courtroom where you tremble waiting for a verdict. It's made to in a way, it's a peaceful environment where you wait maybe for important grave, even very serious decisions to be taken. So Guna Raspblund in Gothenburg. And indeed, wood does help bring warmth to this interior. And the well-known Scandinavian design in terms of furniture helps too to create a familiar, almost intimate atmosphere in a building which is otherwise an institutional building and potentially a cold building, if not a threatening building, because it's a courtroom. But such furnishing creates an atmosphere of comfort, almost, of security and warmth. It's a good building, both inside and outside. I felt that Renzo Piano, in his Palais de Justice, the Justice Palace he built recently in Paris, found some inspiration in this building for the interiors, not for the exterior at all, which is huge. But the interior seems to have some references, I don't know if intentional or unintentional, towards this much more modest building by Guna Raspblund. Maybe for this architecture, the expression lyrical functionalism would be adequate. Of course, a lyrical functionalism is very different from functionalism without anything lyrical. But like any good architecture is architectural poetry. This is what it is, done in reticent, simple terms, yet sensitive, distinctly sensitive. Because I think it is very important not to threaten people who have to use the services of this building. So you can see the relationship between the old and the new. The columns are also very elegant. They could have been heavy, but because he, creates this rift between the two sides, they are slender, and this helps to this feeling of not heaviness within this building. A very skillful architect, no doubt. Too bad he died at 55. Look at the event of the first, step on this stair. It is a transition between the horizontality of the floor here and the sloping plane of the stair. It's a beginning for something else, kind of a threshold. And look here at this detail, which is functional, technical, and yet magically, to me, to an extent, is lyrical. Is almost like a little sculpture in a way, or a little, yeah. It's done very well, and yet, in essence, it's just function. The lamps also. Now some private houses. We begin with a house he built for himself, in fact, an extension to an existing house. And I like this house very much because he didn't try to embellish it, or it's a basic house. It's rural, it's very simple. The interior, yes, has a large chimney, and it's kind of interesting that is interacting or intersecting almost with the stairs, with the steps of the stair. It looks like a warm interior, and not just because of the chimney, of course. I will rush a little bit because we'll have two more presentations, and with a lot of images, and I don't want to become, to this presentation to become too long. So this is Guna Raspblund, the famous Swedish architect, and I always admire the Scandinavian ability to be reticent, to be discreet, to not overdo it. Now, of course, today, especially, there are exceptions, even in Scandinavia, in Denmark, for example, and to whom I'm referring to. Anyway, this kind of house, in my opinion, is an example of what a superior architect, a good architect, built for himself without trying to show off at all. And this modesty is, I think, a quality. Now, this is another house. I hope I have other images. I don't know who the client was here. Anyway, the Villa Snellman. It's a house he built This house is in a rather, I don't know. I think the last two buildings that I show by him are a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit, on one hand, whimsical, on the other hand, a little bit too much making concessions to what is called historicism or neoclassicism. Uh, I don't think these buildings, these last two buildings, are his best works. Because perhaps the proximity to what we called later, much later, postmodernism is potentially at least very obvious. Interesting how he did, he crafted this corridor here, you know, with narrowing towards the end of it, so thus amplifying the perspectival dimensions of it. Uh, yeah, this is how the house looked like or looks like. I don't know what to think of these, you know, ornamental details here, or even these tiny little windows here, a little bit strange. But anyway, maybe here he was influenced or tried to connect with the architecture of the place, with the, you know, vernacular architecture of the place. I don't know. Okay, another villa by him, and in two or three images, I will end the presentation on him. Unless on this one, I have also some images with the contributions to the competition for that extension for the Stockholm Public Library. Before though I show those projects, this is another project that was built by him, a cinema in Stockholm, which I visited. This is a rendering prior to the project, I imagine, and another one, but you'll see the work it was built. It's just a theater, a cinema. But it has character, a certain uniqueness, because of the presence of these you know, statues, and so there is some magic here in terms of the atmosphere. But there is a gentle historicism at work here. Skandia Theater, you know, the Skandia Cinema in Stockholm. Guna Raspblund. There was here there was an architect was immersed in culture, and today I sent an email to someone, you know, with a quotation from Alvar Aalto, who said architecture belongs to culture, not to civilization. A very powerful statement from otherwise a very discreet architect. So architecture belongs to culture, not to civilization. Of course, it remains to be discussed the difference between culture and civilization. But he was very clear about differentiating between them and saying architecture does not belong to civilization. It belongs to culture. And this is what we see in this small theater, in this small cinema. We can tell that this is the world of representation, of theater, of film, it's about human culture. Now I end this presentation on Guna Raspblund with some competition entries for the extension of the Stockholm Public Library, which was built by him. Here we see the building, his building, and so this was the building site. I wanted to participate myself, but I actually thought of building the extension underneath this hill, meaning underground, because there is a hill here. There are very exotic, eccentric proposals, in my opinion, not quite appropriate, because they in no way this proposal connected with or would have connected with the building by Guna Raspblund. So here is Guna Raspblund, and here is another architect trying to extend the library in this way. The competition was won by someone who didn't do a brilliant job, and I'm glad it was not built. A committee of people that decided to award the first prize to that project, but there were protests. It was not a very interesting project. There were other interesting projects. There were 1,000 participants. They had a lot of people participating, but the winner was not truly a great work. Anyway, still the Temple of Books by Guna Raspblund stands out in its discreet way. Even this thing is, contrived and forced and somehow inappropriate in the vicinity of Guna Raspblund. There were many projects, and you can find them if you are interested on the web. All kinds of proposals. Okay, and now we go to the second architect, who was only obliquely, I would say, an architect, although some would maybe protest to that statement. Anyway, a very interesting man, Friedrich Kisler, born in 1890, and he died in 1965. And you see Frederick John Kiesler, born Friedrich Jakob Kiesler in Czernowitz, Austro-Hungarian Empire. Now it is in Ukraine, born on September 22nd in 1890 and died in New York City on December 27, 1965. Was an Austrian-American architect, theoretician, theater designer, artist, and sculptor. But as I said, I have a monograph on him published by the Whitney Museum of Art, where it says a Romanian architect, theoretician, theater designer, artist, and sculptor. Anyway, he taught at Columbia University in New York a very interesting course on Correalism, what he called Correalism, and it is related to correlate, to bring together things. Origin and etymology of Correal, Latin correus, person accused along with another, from com, with, together, plus reus, accused person. So to correlate is about bringing together. And this is an important thing, I think, for art, because the oldest etymological definition of the word art that I found in Sanskrit was art equals bridge equals God. So what is bridge? To bridge is to bring together. So it's related to, Correalism. From 1937 to 1941, Kiesler directed the Laboratory for Design Correlation at Columbia University in New York and developed his theory of Correalism, a holistic approach to design. Here is the cover of a book. And he was very appreciated by, especially by artists. He had friends, some of the most important avant-garde artists of the time, and you see there, he was called an architect, kind of an artist and a visionary. And yes, he is very valued today for his, some I call his scribblings, his attempts to bring a new architecture and a new mentality in art and architecture that was not confined to dogma, to rationalism, and to what he criticized, functionalism. You see Peggy Guggenheim and Friedrich Kisler, the story of art of this century. This was a picture of an exhibition he himself designed with works of important artists, like this one is probably Kandinsky. Anyway, here he is with other people, building something. He's here, of course, in the center. And he did all kinds of installations and exhibitions because he worked in various fields, design, art, theater, architecture. He did this design also. He did a major exhibition for the Surrealists. But he was also influenced by the Stil. He was part of the group, the Dutch art group, for a while. I think not a very long while, but he was. But his most famous work is The Endless House. And we are going to see the project, which remained a project and a large model that he made himself. He was a public figure. He was a catalyst. He was a friend of many artists. He did exhibitions, installations. He published. But I would say The Endless House plus his notebooks are very, very interesting, with very provocative drawings. Architecture as biotechnique. So this, he published this many years before the preoccupation with the bio in architecture. Here he is, on the floor, studying something or drawing something. I guess he was also good at public relations, at the publicity, because he understood that through publicity you can gain recognition and you can achieve, what you search for. Here he is. I don't know if he's inside the model, The Endless House, but we are going to see some pictures with him inside the model house that he built. Here he is with a very important Dutch North American painter, de Koning. So Kiesler is on the left. Kiesler again, smoking himself. And here he is in a picture with a shrine of books that he built in Israel. Picture from his exhibition for the Surrealists that he designed. I think the connection between architecture and art is beneficial, maybe to both. I think architecture needs art to warm its soul, if for nothing else. And art maybe needs architecture in order to feel less orphaned in this world, because perhaps Walter Gropius was right, that the sculptors, the painters, and the architects should come together and build together the building of the future. Now I show some sketches. I don't know how to call them, some studies, but they are very interesting. They stir me up. I was never truly able to study them sufficiently well, but I like the drawings. They are precise, they are artistic, they are temperamental, and they show a certain surrealism. It's an interesting combination. I mean, look at here, what is this? It's hard to explain, but I think the drawings are very, they have an authenticity, the authenticity of an intense man, an intense imagination, and thirst for trying to understand phenomena, visual or otherwise. This is, I don't know what this is here, but this is a fragment from his Endless House. And now I show the Shrine of Books. I hope I come back a little bit later to the Shrine of Books, to the Endless House. So he built this in Jerusalem. I don't find it as a building and really as an exceptional building. Somehow I like more his unfinished works. Anyway, he built it, and it is indeed some kind of a futuristic shrine. It's like the inside, it almost looks like the inside of a James Bond movie. It was built a long time ago, and it was meant for books, the Shrine of Books. Why exactly he used this shape, I do not know. Maybe there are explanations about this. Anyway, it is unusual. Even the function, the Shrine of Books, is not a library, it's not a bookstore, it's the Shrine of Books. So the books are brought to a metaphysical level, if not downright spiritual. What is the significance of the black wall? Maybe the wall of ignorance that he was addressing in one of the sketches that we just saw. An interesting work, though, and charged with symbolism. I don't know who that gentleman was. Anyway, of course, Kiesler is on the left. And the unity, you see written underneath, the unity of architecture, the plastic arts, and the spectator. This is a study for an exhibition designed from 1947. We don't think, I think, enough about this unity between architecture and the plastic arts. And I think this is detrimental to both. Here are images of his Endless House, a large model that he built. It was a meditation on a house, on a possible house, which indeed was supposed to be endless, or give the feeling that it is endless, as opposed to most houses, most other houses. Here is the creator inside the model, like a child scrolling on the floor. A diagram for the ecology exhibition study for a project in the Museum of Natural History from 1944, from the Austrian Friedrich and Lilian Kiesler Foundation in Vienna. I like these drawings by Kiesler, I really do. And they have this innocence almost that I also noticed in the scribblings of in the drawings of very few architects. There is an architect I have in mind now, an Italian architect who lived in Brazil. Maybe you know of her. I will not mention her name because I want to keep it a secret, but she was a remarkable architect who drew in the same way Kiesler does, with little animals, spread even in front of modern buildings, all kinds of reptiles and snakes and insects. And this shows an openness of mind, which most of the time professionals do not have. I was talking, of course, about Lina Bobardi, a very remarkable architect. So remarkable, in fact, that some years ago in London, there was an exhibition of her works and the works of Zaha Hadid, and they divided equally the surface of a poster. On the left was Lina Bobardi, and on the right, Zaha Hadid. And this was almost unheard of. I don't think Zaha Hadid would have accepted easily to have the space of a poster divided with anyone. Anyway, this, by the way, of this drawing by Friedrich Kisler. We saw this picture already. Here he is with his endless house, which remained also endless in the sense that it never came to fruition, in the sense that it was never built. Endless house, intersections of art and architecture, the Museum of Modern Art in New York. I don't know in what year this was. Anyway, you see in what vicinity he is placed. Works spanning more than 7 decades are on display, including architectural work by Mies van der Rohe, Frank Gehry, Friedrich Kisler, and Rem Koolhaas, alongside dwelling-related pieces by artists such as Louis Bourgeois, Bruce Neumann, and I don't know that person, Rachel White something. Anyway, he did also this sculpture. He did also this theater stage design. He was an artist indeed, a man dedicated to art in various forms. Again, this drawing, which I like very much, which I don't know what it means, but I do like it. Graphically, this one I showed. This one I didn't yet show, but I show it now. They are conceptual, but they are also, they have nerve, they have verve, they have artistic qualities. The Kisler's double vision, it's an article about Kiesler written by Levius Woods, who died in 2012, and you can find it on his blog, leviuswoods.wordpress.com. It's a good text about the so-called double vision of Kiesler and other drawings by Kiesler. Of some, you could say that they are analytical, but in a surrealist key somehow. It would be interesting perhaps to compare the drawings, respecting also the distance and the drawings of the analytical drawings of Leonardo da Vinci and the surreally analytical drawings of Friedrich Kisler. He was using his mind to question, but he was also using his hand in order to draw in a very artistic way, if I can say so. An inquisitive mind indeed. And this wall, we saw it in Jerusalem, in front of the Shrine of Books. It's not just the wall, but it's also this, tempest in a way, this agitation in front of it, which maybe is the duality between what is static and what is dynamic, between stability and instability. And here we see an arrow, a vector with a question mark. There is even an hourglass, and I don't know, maybe it's about the passage of time. I don't know. Anyway, moving forward, we still have to see David Adjaye, also born today on the 22nd of February of September, I'm sorry. And this is an interesting proposal for a possible building, I think a theater. Look at the human silhouette here. It was not built, but it would have been interesting if it was built. I don't know very well why this picture is in this presentation. I think this person from the back is Giacometti, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I like this picture for some reason. When I prepared this presentation, I thought of including it. It's an image, I guess, of New York City, probably during 1 year when Kiesler was alive in New York City. Anyway, the Shrine of Books again. And so from 1937 to 1941, as I already read, Kiesler directed the Laboratory for Design Correlation at Columbia University and developed his theory of correalism, a holistic approach to design based on scientific analysis that revolved around the human being. Kiesler's research led him to concentrate intensively on human perception, and he developed the vision machine, through which he sought to visualize human vision as an active process. These studies formed the basis of his later exhibition designs. In the course of 1940s, Kiesler also worked on two extensive book projects, a publication of his theory of design of correalism and the cultural anthropology of architecture with a sonorous title, Magic Architecture. Both writings remained unpublished. This I already read. Why is it here? Now this is a cinema that he built in 1929, a cinema that it would be interesting to compare it with the one that we just saw by Guna Raspblund. This one is clearly modern, and I would say aesthetically still satisfying for us today. Berlin was also, he worked also in Vienna, in Berlin and Paris. Let me see, what is the reference here to Berlin? It is the city in which Kiesler celebrated his first great success with an electromechanic stage design for Karel Kappels, with, I think is with an L there, RUR, which was, I think, the first work that mentioned robots in 1923 at this theater am Kurfürstendamm, and literally jumped feet first into the avant-garde scene. A year later in Vienna, he caused a furor with the exhibition design of the International Ausstellung Neuer Theatertechnik, which he also curated, and another sensation with his space stage around as the central exhibition piece. He was a catalyst and able to negotiate between artists, architects, theater people, and so on. Very, very active in the field of art. Within his endless house, these are the plans and the elevations and the sections of the house, which was never built, but maybe it would be interesting to build it once. I think he was searching, like other people, for the absolute, in a way, for eternal move and freedom and a dynamic life, and running away from constraints, in essence, running away from lack of liberty. From New Harmony to Houston, this was something that students built after his death, and we are going to see some images. What started as a studio project to rethink Friedrich Kisler unbuilt grotto for meditation had turned into an opportunity for scholarship and design. That the unveiling of the digitally fabricated new Harmony Grotto is the first installation of a two-tier project that will culminate in the publication of a forthcoming book. Anyway, this was a publisher, an announcement for what they did. Kiesler proposed, this is, I think, a chapel by Philip Johnson, and they built what Kiesler sketched and modeled. Is this is the model for a grotto for meditation, and the students built what you see here. Is different from what Kiesler envisioned, but it shows again the power of art to transcend the limitations of time. The artist, the architect, Friedrich Kisler, he died, but his ideas continue to be ferments, and the students in this university worked on it. So I don't know what this is. Another drawing by Friedrich Kisler, and that's it. And now we go. So let's wish him happy birthday again. And now we go to the third architect, a contemporary architect, and an important one today. So important that he became Sir David Adjaye. Unfortunately, this presentation would have benefited from more examples, but I'll still show some buildings by this important architect born in Ghana. And I think when he was 9 years old, he moved to England, to Great Britain with his parents. He studied there. So let's read. Sir David Frank Adjaye, born on the 22nd of September, 1966, is a Ghanaian British architect. He is known for designing many notable buildings around the world, including the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. Ajaya was knighted in the 2017 New Year honors for services to architecture. So he became a knight in Great Britain. That is Sir David Ajaya. He is the recipient of the 2021 Royal Gold Medal, making him the first Black recipient and one of the youngest recipients ever. This is the man, and it shows again that if you have conviction, if you have talent, if you work hard, and if you have also a little bit of luck perhaps, you can succeed. Because it's not easy, to be born, even if he had probably certain privileges, I don't know, but, moving to Great Britain and coming from Africa, he was able to arrive at the top of architecture, the top of profession, which is not easy at all. Some drawings by him, sketches for buildings that he actually built. These are sketches for the museum that I just read he built for African culture in Washington, D.C., and we are going to see it. He builds a lot now, so that's why there are other buildings by him that I do not show. This is his signature here. This is from 2017. You can find all his works on the web, including his, website, Ajaya and Associates. Now, I like this work very much, built in South Korea. It's a pavilion. It's called the Gwangju River Reading Room. But it is a pavilion, but it's sculptural. It says the river reading room is conceived with the intention to give a pedestrian citizen a moment of grandeur, to feel empowered within the landscape. This is the room. This is the pavilion, and indeed it has a monumentality, even though it's not huge, but it is interesting. It has geometry, it has intricacies, it has curves, it has rectangular volumes. It has everything, and I think it's a very good building. It's massive, it's monumental, and yet it offers surprises. It's not crashingly monumental. Why is it called reading room? I don't know, but I guess you can even read a book there. But maybe that's not what was meant. These are the drawings. I don't know if done by him or later on by someone else. It's some kind of a chapel, an open air, chapel, open. The pavilion, it's a pavilion, but you could even speculate that it might have even some relation with what we call meditation, or some spiritual meanings. It's a good building. It's a good look at the plan. These connections to the earth are elaborated and crafted in a rather complex way. Maybe excessively monumental if we talk about just the function of structure, but emotionally or aesthetically, they probably needed to be so in his vision. Now, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Denver, I think this is from 2007. It's an earlier work. You wonder how this young man actually received these commissions in the United States. It's in a way incredible. I don't know what to think of this building. It's a building like other buildings of this sort. A large building. I guess it works. But this building, I don't find it extremely interesting, and not because it is based on the rectangularity. The interiors, like in any exhibition space or museum, with white walls on which you hang wild or less wild artworks, white walls again. Outside, though, is not white; it's black, or almost black. It's dark. It's a citadel of almost of unavailability. It doesn't tell you much about what is going on inside from the outside. And I don't know if he intended this screen to be here or monitor or whatever it is. I find it a little bit too small and too awkwardly placed in the corner here, as opposed to, I don't know if this belongs to him or not. Anyway, it's another museum. I don't think it's a very remarkable building, but we are going to see a few other buildings which are better than this one. Anyway, these are drawings published on Arch Daily. And so this was the Museum of Contemporary Art in Denver, Colorado, in the United States. It still is the same building. He experimented later with a second skin on the facade of buildings. And I think he did some interesting things in this sense, but not here. As I said, this is an earlier work, I think from 2007. The Museum of Contemporary Art. Okay, now this is a more spectacular work, the Moscow School of Management from 2010. So from 11 years ago. This is an almost flamboyant work, as you can see, and maybe appropriately if you think that, we are talking about Russia, we are talking about the country where the constructivists at the beginning of the 20th century stirred things up in art and architecture. The interior, I don't know. It's not very revolutionary. The columns are round and white, the same from bottom to top. But there are some, courageous cantilever parts here. And what is more interesting is actually the skin of those prisms that emerge at the top, and the windows. We are going to see. This is an architect who doesn't stay away from ornamentation. This is almost giving you the impression that this is something in relief. Well, it's not, but it's treated graphically and chromatically. These walls are treated in such a way that from certain points of view, or contemplating the building in a certain light, you might think it's a surface which is not smooth, but it's not the case. And the windows, we are going to see the windows. We are still, what we look at now is at the base of the building. Now, of course, it's a luxurious building, the School of Management, the Superior School of Management. They have a swimming pool inside, very luxurious. They have, this sport facility. But look at the windows, and even inside, even indoors, they seem to be a little bit unsettling, and there is a level of instability, or the dynamics of the wall, although it's a flat wall. Now, this is a typical, almost typical, amphitheater, nothing so special. The drawings are as they are. The plans, though, they show this conflict between the prisms and the roundness of the base. When you think that these are also cantilevered, you begin to understand, a certain visual drama, which can be seen in the pictures themselves. So this was done when he was still young, 3 years after he did the museum in Denver, Colorado. David Adjaye. And this is the unusual almost landscape within which the building finds itself. It's like, just nature around it. And then the audacious cantilever parts of his prisms. There is a certain constructivist expressionism, if I can call it so, maybe a little bit too optimistic. But then in 2010, we were not yet confronted with the melting of the icebergs and the energy crisis, the climate change, and so on. Nevertheless, it shows this building an architect who took risks and takes risks. And if you cannot take risks, you cannot aspire to become knighted, to become a sir or a dame like Zaha Hadid. Architects who take risks, they could fail, but they could also win. If you don't take risks, you lose by definition, in the sense that, if you don't dare, the chance of emancipating yourself are very low. Anyway, it is a more interesting building than the Denver Art Museum, but not, not too different from other, other kinds of architectures built in the past years. A certain, exaggerated belief that we human beings can do anything, especially the managers. This is a top view, or a view from the air. A vol d'oiseau with parking, you can see and it's okay. And here we see two Russians, I imagine, on this, not the double vision of Kiesler. We don't have a double vision here. It's a bicycle for two people. But I found this picture interesting, kind of interesting, on this rural road, and then that building behind them. Building they don't even look at. because if they do this every day, they don't need to. They already looked at it. So Adjaye designed two new neighborhood, well, not new any longer, libraries in Washington, D.C. The Francis Gregory Neighborhood Library and the Bellevue William O. Lockridge Library, which opened in 2012. The award-winning libraries are celebrated for being community beacons. So the Francis A. Gregory Neighborhood Library is this one. And yeah, it is aesthetically, you know, rather interesting. But I don't know. I mean, these windows are ornamental in their rhythmicity, you know, and I'm not sure how beneficial they are to provide the insight without affecting the books with a touch of sun rays or the sunlight. Somehow you feel, now of course we know that he was born in Africa, in Ghana, but we are going to see some other aspects of his work which relate to Ghana, relate to Africa, and in some positive ways, I would say, because even here there is a level of ornamentation. I'm even thinking of basketry, and you know, this is not commonly done by an architect born in Europe or the United States. No. Anyway, so there is in his architecture, it's clearly a modern architecture, but a modern architecture which does not reject the dejected ornament. There are many ornamental things here. You know, this canopy, the articulation of the rotated windows here, it's also ornamental in its nature. And you get this feeling also inside somehow. And look at these lamps. These lamps almost explicitly refer to, you know, the art of basketry in Africa or some other place. It doesn't have to be just in Africa. Anyway, there is a touch of, you know, I could almost say vernacular or folk humanism here. Otherwise, the library is a library, shelves, books, people lower to look at them and so on. Maybe these are a little bit, I don't know if they are not a little bit oppressive, but I guess not, since the library is so favored by the public. So it is built in Washington, D.C. This man built a lot in the States. And he was born in Ghana and he lives in England, in London, but for some reason he was invited or won competitions in the United States. We are going to see a very important museum he built. Anyway, the plans taken from Arch Daily, somehow the plans and the sections they show on Arch Daily are a little bit too whitish, too white, a little bit too pale for my taste, but my taste doesn't count now. Anyway, this library in a neighborhood of Washington, D.C. It's clear in this drawing that ornamentation preoccupied him. Maybe too much, a little, maybe. But an ornamentation based on simple geometries, rotated and so on. But he more and more, you'll see the presence of a second skin, and in some cases, he achieved an architectural embroidery, as I call it, which is very well arrived at. Another library, also for another neighborhood in Washington, D.C., very different from the previous library. This shows that he is not following a signature path. You would almost say it's a different building by a different architect. No, it's the same architect. Well, some things are maybe not different from the previous one. Some are, some aren't. David Adjaye. The plan is indeed very different from the previous one, more sculptural, more playful. So this is how his company, his office is called, Adjaye Associates. Now, this is a major work by him, and it was celebrated copiously, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It's a museum, all right, but what makes it distinct is what I called it, and I mentioned it, the architectural embroidery that is this second skin of the building, which is based on an ornamental element, a sculpture from Africa, a design from Africa. I forgot exactly the name of the artifact. Here we see the obelisk in Washington and the building by Ajaya. And you see the architectural curtain, the embroidered architectural curtain, which is important. And in our time is more and more explored the presence of textiles, not necessarily in fabric, but in employing metal or other materials to weave. So it's a woven second skin of the building, what I call it, the embroidered curtain, or the embroidered facade, or the embroidered mask. It testifies about the complexity of our world, but also it testifies about the need for more sensitive architecture, for bringing back what Adolf Loos, for example, with whom actually Friedrich Kisler worked for a short while, banished. That is ornament. Although Loos himself didn't always reject in his own work ornament, because he used marble, which had built-in natural ornamentations. Anyway, it is, I think, an interesting work by David Adjaye, and again, it is different or other in good measure because of this ornamental panel that covers the building. And he continued this exploration, and you can find on the web other buildings done in the same way lately. He is not the only one. I repeat, the ornament is coming back, and it's obvious. People are tired of just structure, and again structure. They also want a little bit of mystery, like gazing through a fine embroidered curtain and seeing things only half clearly. I mean, if we compare the floor here with this second skin, as I call it, we realize that somehow there is a disjunction. They almost belong to two different worlds. Maybe this is just a beginning. Maybe in time also the flooring could also become a little bit more nuanced and visited beneficially by ornament. Otherwise, the building is monolithical, is maybe not even very surprising in terms of volume, but this embroidery, as I call it, I think adds something to it that makes it, I would say, successful. And it is also a reference to the culture that is, served in this building, because it's about the North American Africans, the American African art and culture. I think the clouds like this embroidery, architectural embroidery too. I think this is the last image of this presentation. And we can only wish happy birthday to David Adjaye. And I thank you for being here today.